Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Blitz Fantasy Football. My name is Ryan Linklater. Today, we're talking about all the rookie rankings post-draft, what we're looking like for each rookie's output heading into our redrafts this upcoming season. We will do another video breaking down their dynasty values here in the next week or so, but I want to take a look at each rookie's value, going through our tier list of each option in our PPR formats. Now, we got a lot of news on each prospect now, what their outlook's going to look like, and where they're slotting in depth chart. So let's hop right into this video and break down each prospect. All right, let's hop into our rookie tier list here, and let's start with tier 1 players. And this is for redraft. Just remember that. Obviously, Dynasty is going to change with Cam Ward jumping up a tier, and then obviously some of the other quarterbacks filling out the later half of this tier list. But number 1, I think it's very clear who we're looking at there. Ashton Genti is the best overall player and should be the 101 regardless for any team. He immediately steps into a massive role for the Las Vegas Raiders and has a significant chance to potentially be an RB1 this season and be the running back 1 overall. I think he's worth potentially looking at the end of your first round in your redraft leagues. Could be an early second pick in a lot of leagues. Genti brings both size, speed, and a really strong receiving game to the table. He's going to be a great running back in the NFL. If Las Vegas's offensive line remains kind of what they were last season and potentially takes a step forward, Genti could be in for a very good season. So he is tier 1. He is in his own tier by himself. And then in tier 2, my number 2 player is Amari and Hampton heading over to the Los Angeles Chargers. The thing with Hampton, obviously you have Najee Harris there, and he's going to have to work his way in that backfield and eventually grow within this offense. But Hampton is the perfect Jim Harbaugh runner that they have been looking for. Brings a very elite size with good speed to go along with it. Is a downhill bruiser and is going to dominate in man schemes in this offense. He's going to be able to run downhill very well. The thing about the Los Angeles Chargers, though, is that they don't pass much, so it's going to be a rushing upside heavy offense. And we saw J.K. Dobbins and even Gus Edwards have some successful weeks last year in fantasy football. So I think Hampton, with his talent level, will be very successful in this offense, and them investing a first-round draft pick capital suggests really good output towards the end of this season. I know he might not start the fastest with Najee Harris being there, but I think Hampton overall will be a really good player for the Chargers this upcoming season. Heading into our number 3 player, it is a little controversial what people think Travis Hunter is going to look like, but if they stick to him being a primary wide receiver, he is going to be the best receiver in this class. And with Brian Thomas Jr. already in this offense, I think it's a great fit for him not to be the focal point of an offense, but also be a very good target, the second best receiver on his team, seeing worse coverage than his counterpart. And then he has an established quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, who definitely has supported some very good wide receiver seasons and very good wide receiver weeks. So I think Travis Hunter's outlook in Jacksonville is extremely bright. Liam Cohen has definitely developed receivers at a very high level. I'd expect nothing less of Travis Hunter. I think he's going to be an absolute steal if he plays a majority of wide receiver snaps like they talked about him doing. Heading into our 4th ranked player in tier 2 as well, Tet McMillan. Tet McMillan goes to a very good situation with Bryce Young as his quarterback. We saw Young support many big weeks from wide receivers in Carolina, whether that is an old Adam Thielen or some young guys like Xavier Legette. We saw Jalen Coker break out a little bit, David Moore as well. Tet immediately slots in as this team's either wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1, with Thielen jumping back in the slot. Tet is a very big receiver at 6'4", brings an elite size, elite contested catch ability to the Carolina Panthers, and I truly think they're going to get him involved. Remember, Dave Canales was also with the Bucs and has produced very good seasons at the wide receiver position as well. So I think it takes potentially a few weeks for Tet to get going, but he is the clear wide receiver 2 in this class, and it's not even close at this point. Heading into tier 3, we get a little bit jumbled mess here in our top 24, and I think it starts with Trevion Henderson here. And Trevion Henderson might not have the easiest path to succeeding with some of the other guys in this tier, but Henderson is by far the most explosive playmaking running back and potential player in this class. When he catches a pass or he runs the ball, he has a chance to take it to the house anytime. And, the biggest problems with him was durability. If he splits time and plays potentially 50 to 55% of snaps alongside Ramondre Stevenson and has a lot of explosive plays, he will be a very valuable asset in PPR formats. And I do think the fumbling problems of both Stevenson and Antonio Gibson last year bode very well for Henderson having a significant role in this offense right off the bat. The talent is there for him to be a very good running back. If he could stay healthy and maintain a 12 to 15 touches in his rookie season, he's in for a very good year and is going to be a solid RB2 in this upcoming season. The next player is his teammate, Quinshon Judkins, right here. has my overall 6th best player, and in tier 3 right here, Judkins is likely going to be the RB1 in Cleveland. Now we have Jerome Ford there. They also drafted Sampson later in this draft as well, but Judkins immediately slots in as this team's RB1, considering the fact they invested pretty high capital in him as well. Judkins has produced very good at the college level in all 3 years. Very good NFL prospect coming in. And I think the only thing that concerns me with his outlook is the Cleveland Browns offensive line was extremely poor last season, struggling with injuries and poor play with regression among that unit as well. If that offensive line struggles again, Judkins is going to have a hard time getting going, but the path to touches is very clear in his first year in Cleveland. So we'll see if they're behind a lot. I don't know how much he plays on third down in his first year. So that is another thing to look out for. But Judkins is a very polished player who is going to be able to run the ball very well. In my tier 3 as well as potentially controversial pick here, Colston Loveland. Yes, Colston Loveland is my number 7 player. And here's why. The Chicago Bears went out and added playmakers on this offense. We know that they already have DJ Moore. They already have Romo Dunze. They even have Cole Kmet in this offense already, but they went out and added Luther Burden and Colston Loveland to add to these playmakers. Loveland is going to be an absolute beast for the Chicago Bears, and here's why. The Bears honestly surprised a lot of people picking him at 10, and they potentially overdrafted him a little bit. The last time we saw a Ben Johnson-led offense do this to 2 players, it was Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs, and they both wound up working very well. And a lot of people argue, well, Sam Laporta didn't necessarily have the volume in a Ben Johnson offense. Why should we be convinced that Colston Loveland is going to be very good? But you know what Sam Laporta had in Detroit? A ton of touchdowns. If Loveland can produce high-volume touchdown weeks, he's already a great receiver coming out of Michigan. And if he develops as a blocker too, he's going to be an every down tight end. That's going to be super scary. And I think having him in tier 3, being able to get him here is an absolute steal. And who knows what we're going to get in the Chicago offense. I really want to take my chance on Colston Loveland this year. I think he's a sneaky middle tight end 1 this season. Heading into our other tier 3 guy, the tight end for the Indianapolis Colts, Tyler Warren. Now, Warren probably would be higher on this list if he didn't go to Indianapolis. I absolutely am out on Anthony Richardson as a quarterback. I think his completion percentage is extremely concerning for any output and consistent production from the tight end position and other positions in that offense, but Tyler Warren's a blue chip prospect. He's an extremely good blocker. He's an extremely good down the field vertical threat as well. And we saw him even have his own running packages, which he won't have in Indianapolis with Richardson there. But Warren is an extremely athletic player, very polished tight end, one of the best players overall in this class. I think you have to consider him in tier 3, even though he probably landed in one of the worst spots he could possibly land in. So I think Warren's a great player, but yeah, the 8 spot seems about right for him there. All right, heading into our next prospect here, we got RJ Harvey from the Denver Broncos. Harvey is a very polished runner as well. Very good production in his time at UCF. And he lands in a spot where he has a clear path to opportunity in his first year with the team. I think RJ Harvey, the way that the Broncos passed on Amari and Hampton suggested the fact that they had a guy in mind in this draft that they wanted to go out and get. I think Harvey was potentially that guy. The Broncos needed a running back who could consistently produce within the tackles. They do have Jaleel McLaughlin still on the roster, but they need a guy that could go run the football consistently 15 to 18 times a game. Harvey's production in college with 1,500-yard seasons in the Big 12 definitely stands out. He's a quick athlete, and I think he's a sneaky prospect here. I have him in Tier 3 with a massive opportunity to produce in Year 1. Heading into Tier 4, these are a lot of guys that have potential output, but don't necessarily have a clear path to opportunity in Year 1 that's going to be consistent with the rest of their careers. We got Caleb Johnson right here. Definitely a very good prospect as well. But Johnson heads into Pittsburgh where he automatically gets a timeshare split with Jaylen Warren. Johnson likely will operate in that Najee Harris role where he'll never have a super high ceiling, but will have a pretty safe floor with 10 to 15 touches per game. If he's efficient in those touches, you're going to have some nice weeks. If he's not efficient in those touches, it's going to be a losing week. He's going to be around a 8 to 12 point average in Year 1. If he can be a little bit, provide some youth, I'd say, compared to what Najee Harris provided for them last season and potential more big playability, he could be a sneaky pick, but Tier 4 makes a ton of sense for him right now. My next player is Emeka Egbuka. I think Egbuka makes a ton of sense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but the only problem is, well, the Buccaneers have three other receivers who are really good: Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Jalen McMillan, Agabuka. Seems like it was a pick if Chris Godwin is not ready by week 1, and that's kind of what we felt like we got here with him being selected. He has a really good long-term outlook, but for this season, I'm not necessarily super high on him. He's a really good prospect. He's going to get an opportunity, but he really feels like he's going to land within that 500 to 600 yard range this year instead of making a significant impact on the fantasy football scheme. Next player here, Matthew Golden. Golden is an absolute burner at the wide receiver position. It's just a similar situation to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Green Bay, and I'm not sure Golden automatically slots in as the team's wide receiver 1. He reminds me a lot of Christian Watson in the way he's a down-the-field burner and has a route tree that isn't necessarily developed yet and needs to keep learning other stuff. If Golden can develop a route tree before his first year, he's going to be a really good sneaky pick in this draft. But I think Golden's going to get mixed up in what Green Bay has, and that's a lot of speedy receivers that don't have good route trees, and I think Golden fits right in with that. So I'm not necessarily thinking he's a great player and overall fit in fantasy football this year. The next player is Luther Burden, who landed with the Chicago Bears. Burden has the talent of the guys in tier 3 and above, but landing on the Chicago Bears and the character concerns are definitely something that's not great for him. If DJ Moore does operate as a primary slot receiver, then I think that Luther Burden's outlook in fantasy football is a little bit lower. If Burden can operate as that slot guy in the Ben Johnson offense, we've seen what Amon-Ra St. Brown can do. But if he's an outside guy with Rome Odunze already competing out there for snaps, it's definitely going to be very tough and inconsistent. We saw J-Mo be a spike player last year. Burden in his rookie season could be similar to that with spike weeks and weeks where he completely disappears. Next player, Cam Ward for the Tennessee Titans. And redraft purposes, guys, Ward does not have a great outlook for this upcoming season. The Tennessee Titans have Calvin Ridley, a solid backfield mix of Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, in a developing offensive line, but the offense looks like to be a bottom 5 to bottom 10 unit in the NFL. He will be very inconsistent in his rookie season, and depending on how he is as a rusher in terms against NFL talent, I'm not necessarily convinced he's going to have a ton of upside there as well. So Cam Ward finds himself in that next tier in tier 4. Heading into the next guys, these are some dart throws here that have some high upside potential, but don't necessarily jump off the board right away. Jack Beck is our first player. He immediately slots in as that third playmaker in that Las Vegas Raiders offense. Beck is an extremely talented, powerful slot receiver. He has good size, good strength, and he works underneath. It's going to bump Jacoby Myers a little bit more outside. And I think Beck does have good long-term potential, but I think as a rookie, he's going to need some time to develop. And especially with the mouths to feed for Las Vegas, it makes sense on the football field for this pick. But Beck in fantasy football does not look like a consistent option right now. He is going to be good down the stretch, I feel like, but he's more of a we'll see what happens instead of he's on our draft boards just yet. Jaden Higgins for Iowa State, is our next player. Higgins, absolute baller at Iowa State, really good player as well, but ultimately in Houston, he's the number 2 option who could see a really good outlook in Houston, but it feels like he's going to be stuck behind Joe Mixon, Nico Collins consistently. He's going to be fighting with his former teammate Jalen Noel, Christian Kirk as well for targets, and even if Tank Dell does wind up returning towards the end of the season, that's another knock on him. I really like Higgins as a prospect, but it might take some time for his feet to get wet for the Houston Texans. Another player here, Cam Scatabo for the New York Giants. We already know what Tyrone Tracy is as a runner. I think Scatabo actually complements him very well in that backfield. Could perform a solid 2-man backfield in New York, but the offense doesn't appear to be too good heading into this season, so I'm not necessarily buying into the RB2 in this offense right now. The other guy in that offense, Jackson Dart. I do think Jackson Dart has a ton of upside in the future, but it looks like his path to starting in year 1 does not look very high with Russell Wilson there. So I'm not necessarily having him on my draft boards to start. Really good improviser, can run the football good if he does get some opportunities. Does have a pretty high floor in terms of fantasy with that rushing upside. The next guy that makes this tier, Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams is a sneaky option in fantasy football next year. He's a very good player, and I think the New England Patriots got a steal with him. I think outside of Stephon Diggs in this offense, the Patriots are still looking for playmakers in the passing game. I think Williams could be that guy for them, providing that value down the field and production down the field that they're missing, and could slot in as Drake May's number 1 guy as Stephon Diggs starts to age. All right, and then heading into our final tier here, we have our last few players. We're going to start with Trey Harris, who landed with the Los Angeles Chargers here. I think Harris could potentially be that wide receiver too they're looking for in Los Angeles, but he doesn't necessarily test very well in terms of athleticism. Is more of kind of like that Mike Williams where he's a down the field threat but doesn't have the size that Williams has. I think that it's an interesting pick just because he could slot in as a wide receiver too, but he has to compete with Quentin Johnston as well. And it feels like he's truly the wide receiver 4 right now in this offense. If he does break out, we'll probably see some news in camp about him trending in the right direction. Another guy, Jalen Noel here, teammate of Jaden Higgins. Seems like he's slotting in as that wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3, but tested really well in terms of athleticism and being a playmaker, so he could slot in as a slot receiver long term for this team, but he also will be competing with Tank Dell in that slot when he gets healthy. So it's very interesting to see from that perspective as well. Another guy, you got Jalen Milroe here. If for some reason Sam Darnold goes down, Milroe slots in as a high upside, high floor guy due to his rushing upside, and in that Mike McDonald scheme, they're going to want to run the ball a lot. So I do like where he landed, but the path to starting is not very clear in year one. Jaden Blue, a guy that does have a decent path to starting this season for the Dallas Cowboys, but he is competing with some veterans there. If he does prove himself in camp, it could be a sneaky pick for the Dallas Cowboys at the running back position. And then you got Tootin here, who absolutely ran a crazy time of the draft. Speeder for Jacksonville, but he also competes with Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. So not exactly ideal there. And that is our tier list for our rookies post-draft. All right, there it is, folks. Our prospect breakdown for every rookie heading into our redrafts this season. There's a lot of guys that have a lot of upside this year. I truly think so. This class is very deep in terms of running backs that have very good outlooks in fantasy football. So stay tuned with all that training camp news and stuff coming out. Stay tuned on our channel for more updates throughout the week with our rankings, post-draft, all that good stuff. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you guys next time.